Okay, so I hope you enjoyed practicing. So now we're going to move on to our final project. All right, so you're going to use your white paper that you have. Now, if you're at home and you don't have white paper, again, anything you have is fine. Now, for this project, you technically need construction paper. If you don't have construction paper, you are going to make sure that everything that you draw is super light because you're going to have to erase a whole bunch, especially on the interior of your circles, okay? So the first things you want to do is you want to make sure that your paper is horizontal, and it's kind of hard to see because my screen is literally tiny. And then I'm going to place my circles on here. So I'm going to have 5 different flowers, and these are 5 different size circles. And I'm just going to kind of go move them around and see what I really like and what I want. And I'm going to have mine look something like this. I think I'm going to move these this way. And then once you have yours placed, let me see if I can bring this out a little bit more. Once you have yours placed on your paper, then you're going to go ahead and trace around these. Now, again, if you don't have construction paper at home, you need to make sure that all of these things that you do are really light. The other thing I didn't mention is that you want to make sure that you have a nice gap at the bottom because we need to have space for our stems and leaves. Okay? So I'm going to take this and I'm going to trace around all of these stencils. Oop, that one moved. All right. So here's my stencils. Now again, like I said, we're going to cover these in paper. But if you're not, if you're at home and you don't have construction paper, see, ours are going to end up looking something like this, then you're going to end up coloring the insides of these with colored pencil or marker. So you need to make sure that whatever you do, you don't draw on the inside of these circles, okay? So now that I have these drawn, and then I get to start the fun part, which is making these turn all into flowers, okay? So this is where you have to decide, well, are these going to be on the top of the flower? Which ones are going to be on top? Which ones are going to be on the bottom? How are they going to overlap? So however you choose that, it's going to work. So this one right here I'm going to have is towards the front. It's going to have flowers behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and put my bigger stencil around because I know that this is going to be the outside. And again, I'm drawing so light. Now if you're like, oh, I can't draw light, you can hold your pencil, towards the top. That's going to help you from pushing. Now pencils are magical, and let me show you why they're magical, because even if I barely push, on my pencil, it's going to make a mark. That's the great thing about lead. So you can, just barely put it on your paper and it'll make a mark. So this is going to become the same process. Now, sometimes, you get in a rush and you're like, oh, I got to get this done. But you really want your flowers to look as symmetrical as possible, okay? And by the way, when you have something that looks symmetrical all the way around in like a circle, it's called radial symmetry. So I'm going to, again, split this in half, and it's going to be the same process. So you're just going to work with, splitting these in half and then quarters and then eighths. You can always turn them into sixths, whatever you choose, okay? And then, you're still going to do the same. You're still going to do the same process for the outside part where you're making your, finding the center, and then, you're putting a dot on the outside. Now, a lot of these things, like I said, you're going to erase, so you need to make sure that you're not drawing really, really dark on any of it, okay? Now, another thing that I failed to mention earlier is that sometimes you draw these and you draw these dots, but when you're drawing your flower stems, they don't quite line up with the dot. And that's fine, okay? That's gonna happen. It's not that big of a deal. As long as, when you're looking at it, it looks correct. That's what's really gonna matter, okay? So I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna set this all up, and then I'm gonna continue drawing, and then I'm gonna do this for all of these. All right, so that's my first flower. Now it's relatively done. And then I'm gonna go ahead and move on to this next one over here. And this one I'm going to use, a smaller circle stencil. I'm gonna like this one. I'm gonna use this one. Now I'm going to erase this portion of the circle because I don't need it. It was just my guide, okay? And I'm gonna set this here and I'm gonna center it the best I can, again, making sure it's relatively even all the way around. And I'm gonna trace around it. right. And I'm going to, again, do the same process, but this one I'm going to do a little bit different. So I'm going to draw these lines like I normally would, but I'm going to end up making 16 of them. All right, and then I'm actually going to just extend these lines out like this. And that is actually all I'm gonna do for this flower. And when I add designs later, it'll be a little bit more interesting. And then I'm just gonna continue making these all into flowers. All right, now that mine are all drawn, I'm going to move on to sharpieing everything. Now, remember, you're not going to Sharpie these exterior lines. Also, if you ran into where they overlap, you just have to pick which one goes on top of the other. You can't obviously draw both flower petals because when something overlaps, the other one disappears, okay? So just keep those things in mind. All right, if you are going to be coloring the interior parts of your circles, you also need to outline this interior circle. If you are not coloring yours and you're just going to be using paper, you don't have to outline these circles, okay? Then you need to erase anything extra that you have also.